Wonderful discussion. Thank you so much to both of you. Now we move next to challenge the trends in the healthcare innovation ecosystem. And we have invited Jayne O'Donnell, co-founder at Urban Health Media Project, to be with us. Thank you so much, Jayne.
Hello, and welcome to welcome to Trends in Healthcare Innovation and Technology, and looking at the whole ecosystem. My name is Jayne O'Donnell. I spent 28 years at USA Today up until April of this year, and I am the founder and CEO of the Urban Health Media Project, which trains young, I have a dental thing, which trains young people to do health and social issue reporting in the United States and hopefully around the world soon. I'm so excited to have our very illustrious panel here today. I'm going to just quickly say where they're from. Their bios are in the materials, and they can say a little bit more about themselves, but with 4 people on a panel in 45 minutes, we're going to have to go pretty quick. So we have John Nosta, CEO at Nostalab. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Dirk Richter, who's senior advisor for health at the health department at Abu Dhabi. Mo Fors, who has my favorite title yet ever, head of global commercial digital innovation and head botanist at the Digital Garden Almirall. He'll explain what that is. And Nicole Hill, who's the Global Healthcare Sector Director at Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise International. I want to make this as conversational as possible, and I'm going to open this up to anybody who wants to start. And I want you to talk a little bit about what the most important digital trends are now that are shaping the future of medicine, and how is technology going to impact the way we deliver care? Who would like to start?
Jayne, I guess I'll jump in. I think that we are at both an inflection point and a bit of a dilemma in the world today. I would argue that largely data is, in many instances, the new oil. That data will be the third fundamental window into humanity. Like the telescope, like the microscope, I think data is really carving a path forward. Now, here's the question. Here's the dilemma for me. And Dirk and I have talked about this in many instances, especially in the clinical context. How can you or me or a teacher or a doctor assimilate and integrate all that data into our lives? There's a real disconnect. There's a data gap. The connection between data and information and knowledge and wisdom is really a problem. And I think that that is, first and foremost, a technological solution. And I'll end with this thought. Who's the smartest person in the room? Back in my day, it was the doctor. It was the chief of medicine. It was the lawyer. It might have been even my dad. Today, the smartest person in the room is the computer. And you know what? That flips people out.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you. I would like to bounce on that, and I quite concur to what you say, John. Besides, I think data, you've pointed it out, is really the big issue and the big topic right now. And I guess you are in the United States. On this side of the pond, it's really acknowledged as something very key. So, we talked a lot about artificial intelligence, which is there, but it doesn't solve it all. And what we figure out is that, what counts is the quality of data and the usage value, and a mastered or well-managed circulation of the data, how it is produced, how do you teach doctors to produce it properly so then scientists can analyze it, and how do you value it? So this has been really identified as a key tension of the digital trends. That's something really key that is pointing out. And of course, there is genomics, stem cells, robotics, AI and telemedicine. But you're right, data is the core of the tension to solve in our market.
I was just going to say it calls for a botanist, but either one of you can jump in. Dirk, go ahead.
Yeah, me? Okay, I think when it comes to oil, and data. Abu Dhabi has to contribute somehow. So fully agree. I mean, we are also more looking at data now instead of oil, which is our knowledge-based economy, of course. But I think really data-based healthcare will disrupt the whole system. And we always claim for 20, 30, 50 years, everything is evidence-based, what we do in healthcare, but it's just the opposite. If you really get data and think about what you do, real-world evidence, and you can really customize your treatments, precision medicine, personalized medicine, all based on data. This will change so many things. I think we can hardly imagine today. So this is for sure has a huge impact. Also, I mean, John already highlighted the doctor is far away from being the smartest person in the room, and all the things he has done all the time based on his personal experience may be proven wrong. Based on the data we have. So this is also a cultural change for all our healthcare workers and the whole system.
And Mo, as you think about that, do you see it helping people and somewhat across the board, no matter where they are on the socioeconomic scale, or can data, the way it's being talked about today, and it's going to be talked about, help the less fortunate as well?
Data can help every single layer of the whole industry, and as well for the patients as well. And I think being the devil in the room today, and Dirk just arrived from Abu Dhabi yesterday, so coincidence. The whole point, in my point of view, is the key challenge is not the data itself and for how to organize it, how to collect it. To be honest, the key problem or the key challenge in the market today is mindset and regulations. Because it's if you look at, for example, Google Maps, it would never have been a Google Maps with such regulations in data handling. They had to go through it, they had to disrupt it, and then let's regulate it, which you cannot do it with healthcare. So it was never the problem of having brains in the room that cannot actually analyze data or organize it. But the problem, I'm speaking from Barcelona now, and just to get the data from John to here, it's impossible, because all of this data regulation systems and all the migration laws, which is impossible for me to have a right vision or actually handling the data in the right way. So somehow I think the key challenge, which is handling data that can help patients at the end, help the whole industry at the end, is about actually the way we agree in regulating the data in a matter that it makes sense, and to try to forget that we have to handle the current data or current actually digital in general with the same way we used to handle healthcare 100 years ago, which is happening till today. So if you look at the whole regulation system, the whole regulatory approvals and process, it's still handling healthcare in general the same way they used to do it 40 years ago. And after COVID, it's even now there's more need for getting things faster. But unfortunately, this is the gatekeepers that we are not allowing anyone in this room today to take it to the next step.
You know what, Mo, I think that you've touched on something that's very, very interesting, that the technological solution is a human construct, that we're not talking about bits. We're even not talking about interoperability, which usually comes up. We're talking about the human construct of allowing something to happen. And I think that our ability to adopt and adapt to technology as humans, getting over our fears and our regulatory issues is fundamental to advancing innovation and technology. And just quickly, I've always talked about the fact that innovation has a duality, has an intrinsic duality to it of wonder and fear. That fire, our first technology, would cook your dinner or could be a weapon. The airplane, when it was initially introduced, was very scary. Today, it's the safest form of transportation there is. And AI and technology lives in that domain now, where it vacillates between the domain of wonder and fear. And I think fear is driving that adoption sequence, just like fear was limiting airplane adoption, 80 years ago. So again, isn't it interesting that it's the human idea, the human construct that needs to be changed, adapted, or pushed forward?
Can I add to it? Because I think you pointed again something very important. Healthcare is a special market in a way that it's driven by non-conversion forces. It's driven by market forces. We are industry players, many of them, small and big, quite fragmented when you see the number of startups and very big companies. platforms, etc., you name it. But then it's also driven by regulatory. And regulatory really enforces and can really prevent very interesting solutions to find their market, because it takes so much time. And it has to be a visible, sustainable frame so people know where they are. And the third one, it's also driven by communities. And that's what you said, John. It's about adoption by doctors, adoption by all the care team, and adoption by patients. And when you talk about fear, I would talk about human warranty, because data, it's only the usage and the meaning of it that is useful. And who is the best place to have the meaning is the human being. So you mean that you need ethics, the human guarantor, and also you need to make sure to work so that adopters, users will adopt the digital age, because digital is not a given. And although we know, because of the shortages and the burnout almost of some clinical staff, the first access to healthcare system will be virtual, but with human assistance and human presence as well.
You know, Nicole, I'll make one point and I'll be quiet because I know I'm talking a lot. Telemedicine has been held out as sort of the touchstone of technological convergence, particularly in the context of COVID. But what I'm seeing now, and this is data that's just in, Q4 is not complete yet, but what I'm finding in certain systems is that the use of telemedicine has returned to the 2020 pre-COVID baseline. What the heck does that mean? So we're seeing this technological push, this technological inflection point, all those terms that we all banter about. But the reality is that there's still that impediment, that we've gone back to baseline in many instances. I think there's a lot of learning there.
Because they probably aren't getting reimbursed at the same level.
Sure.
Yeah. I just want to say regulatory. I love how she says regulatory. It makes my beat for the last 40 years seem so much classier or something. Regulatory.
And I can tell you on this side of the pond as well, in the peak of the COVID pandemic in March 2020 to June, there were millions of teleconsultations in France. It was accelerated totally. And then it has gone down because, again, the 3 points is adoption, but also how do you find an economic model and how do you really demonstrate the relevance? And I think we start seeing initiatives that are looking at this, but these lessons of the pandemic are still to be learned.
I was just thinking back to EMRs and when they were required over here, and there was so much resistance, and it seemed to take so long to even get one hospital to talk to itself rather than talk to each other. But let's go back to talk a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to skip over John for a moment, and we're going to go back to Mo. So let's talk about dermatology digital health accelerators, because you've thrown now dermatology in there and gardening. So what are some of the initiatives that you're working on, and that how do they face how do digital startups generally face the dermatology challenge? And what is the dermatology challenge?
A lot of questions. So, so let me say that actually in Digital Garden, that's why I'm the chief botanist, I'm responsible for the Digital Garden. It's one of the accelerators. So I'm a pharmacist as background, and my role is always in healthcare and pharma, is building those digital type of accelerator, building this facing organization between pharma and healthcare startups, so the ecosystem itself. So I always consider myself as a translator that be able to speak both languages. I'm a pharmacist, pharma, and at the same time, I had my own startup. I built a startup, so we are the translation. So the Digital Garden is kind of the place in between where we are able to help a startup and ecosystem, first of all, to consider digital in dermatology, because this is also one thing that a lot of startups, they simply don't consider it, and they go where, let's go diabetes, for example. So how can we ensure that they are using such a technology and something can be useful? And at the same time, we make sure that the business challenges is being well translated in a language that startups are able to understand. So, for example, one of the key challenges is simply, if you look at the remote monitoring and all of those type of teleconsultation, is how we can use AI to identify different skin diseases. And you see big investment from Google just happened, but normally it goes from a very commercial point of view. How can we take this into a real DTX or digital therapeutics where we are able to make a better understanding for the disease before even patient go to physician at the beginning or dermatologist? This is one of the big things. Also, if you look at psoriasis and those type of disease, they have huge impact on the psychology of patients. So how can we ensure that tackle these parts through cognitive behavior changes and psychological disruption, in this case for such patients, are able to have a better way of treatment. So we are working on multiple solutions, for example, with Happify Health, to guide the patient through the whole journey of support psychologically besides the treatment as well. So during the program itself, we try to find startups that can tackle such issues. And we're happy, actually, one of the startups, we had the first exit in the accelerator. So one of the startups were focusing on also how can they pre-identify disease through skin and through the camera itself. So those are the key areas of focus, for example, in our case. And the key challenge that we are seeing every day, that how can we mobilize a startup to work on issues that it really matters for patients, rather than just like things which looks nice or commercially sound nice, but doesn't have a real impact on patients.
Dirk, how about Abu Dhabi? Could you talk a little bit about what you're doing there that's you'd most want to highlight today, and where you think the future you'll be going in the future?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, talking in terms of investments, there has been a shift of paradigms. I mean, we used to invest in concrete and steel, building more healthcare facilities and so on in order to meet the increasing demand. Of course, now there's much more investment in digital. But what we do as a regulator for Abu Dhabi, we really run an accelerator ourselves. So we are in the middle of our innovation ecosystem with a full team. They're really early working with startups, even looking at business models, trying to identify potential regulatory hurdles to really solve them very easy, to work with our regulation teams. And the good thing is my team in this innovation ecosystem is far away from government offices, of course, government employees, but of course, mindset, outside government offices in the middle of this ecosystem. So we really try to invest in manpower to support this ecosystem in very many ways, of course, also investments. However, very clear for us as government, it doesn't make much sense if government invests. It's much better the market, private investors decide about business models, about investment opportunities. But this working with innovators at an early stage has been quite successful. So that's one of the investments, really invest in resources to work with startups, identify regulatory changes. And I must honestly say, we also learned a lot in terms of regulation ourselves. I mean, the challenge for us, and regulatory is important in healthcare, everybody already agreed. The challenge for us, we need to regulate the future. However, we don't know the future. So the best way to learn about the future is really to interact with innovators, the people who build future, who create the future. And this is on both sides. It's very beneficial for startups, but also for a regulator to really look into the future and try to regulate what is still a little bit uncertain. So that's mainly our strategy to facilitate.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go back to Nicole. And Nicole, if you could talk a little bit about what you think the most successful initiatives are that are the technology and just the whole healthcare ecosystem. What do you find most promising?
Well, there's a lot to say, but I'll try to make it in 3 points, Jayne.
I came from USA Today. We need a little bit of brevity. We have 26 minutes.
Yeah, so I think we talked about what happened and what enabled enabling the pandemic. And it was really this acceleration, which still has gone down, which proves there's still economic model value for usage to find, and also lifts over the constraints for regulatory aspects. And still lessons have to be learned. Speaking of the COVID, I think what I found an extraordinary, and we see a lot of in the news, in the media, anti-vaccine people, etc. But I think we need to really see that the development of this vaccine in 1 year was quite extraordinary. And it's incredibly a hope for the population. The next challenge is to vaccinate the whole world. But when you see that digital has enabled to really find and define which molecule, with screening, and interesting companies did help with that. By the way, it's the French company who did this simulation of which molecule could really hurt this Skype protein on the surface of the virus. And this really then accelerated the path to, of course, you had to do the testing, but to deliver on market a vaccine that works, obviously. No? So I think this is incredible. More on what I see from my point of view, I would like to share 2 initiatives. First, and I think it's also what came out from the pandemic is hospitals are under pressure because the system is very acute, still focused. And we see in hospital, in emerging or developed economies, they're close to burnout. They have a lot of pressure. Clinical staff has a lot of pressure. In the wards, nurses spend 20 to 40% of their time fueling EHRs. There is 80% walking, alarm fatigue. And we've seen initiatives in the APAC region, in Australia, where people have been able to, we speak a lot about digital workplace, but develop nurse digital workplace, really relieving with use case driven, understanding where are the pain points, and with, by the way, some connectivity technology like notifications, mobility, asset tracking, really how to facilitate and relieve the life of the nurse. And I think this is very important to attract and keep the nurse in the ward, keep the doctors in the ward, because we see, for instance, in public hospitals, young people can't take it anymore, and they say, I go to something else because it's too much for me. So I think this is interesting initiatives that will continue to flourish, I hope. And I would like to talk about a third one, which relates also to what was discussed earlier with accessibility to all and really maintaining the whole population healthy and going to more preventative health. It's about populational health initiatives. And there are great initiatives, for instance, in your country, Jayne, in the United States, but they flourish all over the world, in Europe, in South America. And I think these represent quite a real hope for the benefit of the population health and the sustainability. Because if you start preventing people who are in chronic conditions to get sicker, the economies you make are so big that you can justify innovations and justify the investments that are there. And I think this is potentially a key, and it has proven with track records that it works. And I think this is something really to look at. And I understand NHS is moving to it. In France, we're looking at it. And I think populational health is really, really a way forward.
But John, it seems to be taking quite a while in the United States to get there. I've been hearing about it for a long time, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts on the future of population health in this country.
Well, interestingly, the path to population health is really, again, I'll argue, a technological solution, which comes from the notion of digitization, which leads to demonetization, dematerialization, and democratization. And that's why changes in technology and advancements in technology can drive population health solutions, because they're all a function of things like, will I use it? Will I pay for it? Will it fit into my exam? Will it fit into my smartphone? Or will it fit into my lifestyle? Because the ideas are big and bold, but ultimately when the functionality comes down to a practical perspective, that's really where things are driving. And we're seeing some very, very interesting developments in that context.
May I
I'm sorry, go ahead.
May I add to what John says? I think
Sure.
what is linked to this is really the need for methodology. It's not only the technology, but it's the business need, it's the health need, and then it's the planning. So it's the convergence on three. And we see emerging technologies which came, for instance, from the space industry, TRLs, CML, concept maturity levels, which are being, if I can say this horrible name, healthcareized, and which we are starting to use as a mean to have a common language between very, very different stakeholders.
And just to follow up on that, innovation is very different than the diffusion of innovation. The ability for ideas to gain traction in complex systems like societies or healthcare is not easy. Many, many good ideas are not adapted for a variety of reasons that range from logistical to functional. So, we have a lot of good ideas, but being able to inculcate them into society is very, very important. That's the diffusion of innovation. We often overlook that.
Which actually is a good segue to the question I was going to ask Dirk, through the lens of the fact that you're a surgeon, a health economist, and you have the position in Abu Dhabi. I wondered if you could be the one to address perhaps the negative aspects of using new technologies, the kinds of things that do cause the resistance and perhaps the problems later on, perhaps privacy, but other types of issues.
Yes, of course, this issue of data privacy is something that comes with any kind of using data, but I think is no real negative impact, but it's more a question of how to implement. We had this rush, this all of a sudden, all digital telehealth during COVID pandemic, and now, of course, for us, it's as a regulator, but also as a payer, since we are also a custodian of government budgets, it's now important to really merge digital and physical care. What we don't want, and this is maybe one of the risks or the negative aspects, to have two systems. One is digital and the other one is the one we are used to. So for us, it's mainly important that maybe the negative side or the risk to really merge both of them, which means you want to see your physician maybe once a month, but three times on top could be virtual care. And the other question is how to pay for it. So I think in general, there is not really a very negative impact, but it's really a question of how to implement, how you take care of the culture, of course, of patient safety. Whatever we do in innovation, patient safety is first. So it's mainly about the question how you mitigate the risks. Otherwise, I think there is a lot of benefits from digital health, and it's pretty more about the question how to implement and how to take care of culture, and of course data security is important, but in general I think that of course mainly positive impact.
And this is a form of a question we were going to talk about, but what about robotics in surgery? You are a surgeon. There is concern, certainly in this country, that sometimes it's rushed into too much, and perhaps for economic reasons for a hospital rather than for patient safety. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
you don't have to comment on this country or what we're doing, but just generally the use of robotics in surgery.
Yeah, I think there are certain kind of procedures that need much more precision than the human being could ever offer. So I think that's very clear. Early stages of robotics, honestly speaking, and I stopped doing surgery quite some time ago. Sometimes you spend much more time waiting for the robot to do the thing instead of doing it yourself as a surgeon. In general, there are certain kinds of brain surgery and other things where you really need to be very precise. I think robotics becomes better and better. It's still a lot of, and I think physicians being afraid of that they will be replaced by robotics. No need to be afraid, but of course as an assistive technology in very many surgeries it will of course gain more and more market share and will be important.
Can I riff on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Because I'm fascinated by robots, but I'm fascinated by the nature of humanity. That to me, technology makes us more human. Technology doesn't threaten our humanity. Technology advances the human domain, our sensory perception, whether we're a surgeon trying to see something, trying to hear something in a clinical exam, or trying to touch something in an intricate surgical procedure is extraordinarily limited. The world around us is an illusion. Our sight, our hearing, my dog hears 50 times greater, smells 50 times greater than I do. And what I believe is technology's path forward makes us more human, makes us better surgeons, makes us a different engaged species, if you will, in the world. And that's why I think that when we talk about telemedicine, if only the telemedicine visit could be as good as the doctor visit, that's nonsense. The telemedicine visit will be better than the doctor visit. And it will go ongoing in a continuous fashion where we will have occasional punctuated visits with the physician. So to me, the path to technology is not one of alienating humanity, but empowering and having technology let humanity bloom to a broader and greater reality.
Mm-hmm. Mo, how about if we hear from you here? What are some of the most important issues in digital health adoption, and what is your strategy, or what strategy do you espouse to overcome them in order to implement and smoothly transform the industry?
The biggest challenge is us, actually. So it's exactly what John was highlighting. It's actually us. It's about the mentality and the black boxes that we enjoy building them, and they innovate and how we are creating them. So which is interesting. So I believe everything was said today, it's actually going to the same point. So I believe, and I had the session before in a couple of events, which is called This of Digital. The way actually pharma reacted, despite, yes, all the healthcare reacted to COVID in a very nice way, but I think we failed big time of driving digital. So if you look at most of the innovations that actually created the current vaccines, it was rejected by pharma a couple of years ago. And most of pharma, I had attended a couple of sessions that all of them was making jokes about the whole mRNA. So the whole thing, what happened is very important point of reflection. So I think what's happening today that we failed. We didn't succeed in the test. But what's really important is to start to learn. Unfortunately, what's really happening today, that now things is getting better, we started to try to go back. And I think this, every one of our colleagues today mentioned it. But what's really important is to try to do what is simple in any transformation. And my role always about digital transformation, it's about changing management. They need to believe, and I really like, and I took a note, by the way, John, about the fear versus wonder. Like, we really need to create wonders, and I love it because it's the reality. I always say that we are like magician. We have to do one big trick that everyone believe in us after this. So the reality and the change that has to happen that by showing these wonders and make sure that we are able to create those pilots in a little bit small hidden way, then you can show the impact. The wonder of the vaccine this time, it was mainly about showing that we really need to change the business model. We need to change our mentality. We need to change management. And I think this is where we need to start now. And you see it in somewhere that actually those new companies coming with those ideations. And you saw there's now a huge move about like, let's do digital accelerators. But most important is not about creating them. It's most importantly is actually use what comes out of it. Because we can create technology. I believe in human. I believe that we need actually those technology to take over so we can do better things. Not about like, I really don't want the visit. I don't want the doctor again to do the same visit again. I want him to do something better, which we don't know today because we never give him the time to do better things. So imagine this was computer. We used to calculate everything with hands. When we did this, we managed to create AI. And after we give AI power actually to do things, we'll be able maybe to fly to Mars to get grocery. You never know. So we really need this mentality change in our leadership, in our management, and believe that whatever works 30, 50 years ago, it will not work anymore. And what I really like, to be honest, when I'm 36 years old, but when I look at even younger generation, you started to see that they are like not accepting the status quo, like they really against it, and they want to try something new, and they want to move forward. And this is where I believe now what happened in COVID, it was a wake-up call for all the industry itself to start learn that it will not work anymore. So they need now to take this next step of change management, believe that the change has to happen, and not going back again. So this now is a challenge, and whoever will go back again, he will stay always back.
Before we get to the big, what the future holds, great thought leader kind of question, I didn't mention, did anybody want to jump in on the topic of blockchain technology and just how blockchain is implemented and how it can be used in biotech, pharmaceutical, life sciences? Anybody?
Sure, I can jump in real quickly. I think that certainly blockchain is here to stay. Its cousin, cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin is also here to stay. And I think that one of the biggest issues in pharmaceuticals is not only supply chain, but privacy, understanding where products come from, and having an immutable ledger seems to make perfect sense in the context of pharmaceuticals. I also believe that cryptocurrency and the tokenization of pharmaceutical assets can allow people to invest in and fund innovation. And this is a true democratizing initiative. Right now, pharma is under the thumb of VC, of Wall Street, to get funds. And it's a very complicated and difficult path. But if we can tokenize assets, make them independent, and drive funding through advocacy groups, through patient groups, we can see a completely different type of funding scenario. And that leads to this notion of, from technology comes democratization. And I think we're going to see that in drug development.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Nicole.
Yes, I think blockchain is also, besides this financial point, which is very, very valid, is also getting into the operating room. And we see some innovations where, if people make errors, and you need to learn from the errors, especially when you're a surgeon. So we are seeing innovative projects where blockchain serves as a ledger of what has been done during a surgery procedure. And this was built up by a surgeon. So it happens to be in the Greater Paris area hospital, and it is in process. But what they're doing is looking how you have a ledger on what is done, so you can reflect back on yourself, maybe not starting to share it, but reflecting on what happened really, so you can change it and amend it, and also for legal reasons have a ledger on what's been done, and also for teaching. So blockchain will be pretty pervasive in healthcare, definitely.
I agree.
Just one last point, and I think reflecting back to the data fact that we spoke at the beginning, I think blockchain is an old technology. It's not something new that we just discovered. The way we are using it in cryptocurrency is what made it new. But the whole point, I believe, it can be a path forward with the whole problem of the whole data management and data migration between countries and between things. So imagine if the future patients are able actually to start selling it and tokenize their data, and we start using it. Because this is a problem. I cannot actually use a lot of technology because we don't have access to data or enough data that a lot of startups, for example, big pharma has. So what I think, the whole blockchain and tokenizing actually data for specific patients and maybe getting paid for it, it could be the future of ability to have a much better access to data and allowing those type of transformation of data globally. So this is where, to be honest, I see blockchain helping us.
Mo, while you have the mic, so to speak, how about we'll start with you and then kind of do a round robin here. Just what are your predictions for the healthcare industry on a global scale, or your vision for the coming decades? 2 minutes.
I think, yeah, it's 2 minutes. I see there's a more role. I see a more role in collaboration between tech and healthcare. I think both every day learn in a hard way that none of them will be able to run alone. So you can see the 100 failures of the big tech companies trying to reach health, and a lot of failures from healthcare companies that they are not doing it right. So I believe the future collaboration and allowing this type of synchronization between two sides is very important to take all of the willingness and the boldness in doing tech from tech industry and all of this knowledge and understanding of patients and the whole ecosystem from healthcare will be able to build. So I believe in now we will start seeing a lot of those collaboration coming very soon. So a lot of those type of consortium between health and tech, real ones, not just like good PR stunt. We're talking about the real ones with access to data and the access actually to outcomes that we can see. The second piece, which I believe it will be it started already, the whole DTX industry. And I think this new products beyond the pill and understanding the product doesn't need to be, or pharmaceutical doesn't need to be chemical only, and it can be a lot of data. This is what we will start seeing much more in the near future.
I appreciate that. Real ones, not just PR ones. How about Nicole?
Yes, I think that I would like to share 4 points. First, I think solving this data challenge will be very key to what comes out of healthcare, because it then implies very big consequences, good, hopefully for the good. The second, I would say, it's really reconciling public health, populational health, and economy to enable relevant innovation that makes sense for people. I think in digital, when we win, it will be because we bring value and sense, and this has to be worked at. Third, it's also about partnerships between public and private. When we see this coming more and more with various stakeholders that need to engage together to make it work. If you don't imply everybody, it will not fly. And third, I would like to give a more, Christmas coming over is really hoping that all this, we have all the assets. It has a bit shrink the world, or what we have lived the last two years. And I think it will enable to upgrade healthcare systems all over the world so everybody can have access and have a better care and people can be thriving more.
Great, thank you so much. Dirk, and by the way, please hashtag Webit, WEBIT, if you have any comments you would like to share or questions. Dirk, go ahead.
Yes, I think one of the big trends to get healthcare out of healthcare facilities to homes, which comes with data, with technologies, IoT, with many, many things. Also not talking about healthcare, but really about population health, but on a risk assessment basis. Now, as of today, we're looking at all kind of prevention. Everybody, like a rain shower, everybody is getting a little bit wet, but we don't really identify the people at risk. And I mean, looking at, I'm still German, living in Abu Dhabi, always have to talk about cars. Now, cars, we're looking at self-driving cars. We looked at the pre-crash phase some years ago. In healthcare, we always wait for the crash. And then we build expensive healthcare facilities and still wonder why costs are exploding. So I think this is aspect of really customized prevention was something that will come, as well as comes with data and many, many other things, but from range tower to really customized way of population health. And this is, of course, one of the things we need to achieve. Otherwise, it will not be possible to manage this avalanche of chronic diseases. I think those are the two things we see.
And disease is getting worse during the pandemic. Seems like everything is getting worse in the country. Please, John, go ahead. Your thoughts?
Thank you, Jayne, for herding cats today. We all have so much to say, and this is such a powerful topic. Right. I want to speak very, very specifically first, and then address it from a broader construct. The rate limiting and the rate expanding step to technological engagement recently, and probably into the next few years, was COVID. We have to recognize that COVID has been an impediment to a lot of innovation, but has also drove innovation. Now we're looking at the vaccine, and the vaccine is not necessarily an answer, particularly when we see it being pushed to 3 or 4 booster shots. How do we manage this? And with future pandemics, I think this is going to be a big issue. Technology is the solution. We live in the context of things like PCR and antigen testing, when in fact we can go beyond those bounds and leverage technology to look at viral burden. In other words, look at the course of the disease when we have it, and then even measure the level of immunity. Something like looking at antibody testing so that we know if we need a booster, if we don't need a booster. You just can't act blindly So I think that's going to be a big change. There's a company called Houndstooth Analytics that's actually looking at measuring some of these parameters. So I think pandemic, COVID, managing disease on population levels is going to be very, very important. Now, let me go to 30,000 foot and talk about what I think is really the fundamental reality. And I'm going to steal this. I'm going to steal this from Alvin Toffler. The illiterate of this century is not those who can't read or write. It's those who can't unlearn and relearn. We have to unlearn habits and relearn new habits, because medicine is defined by habits, and many times they're bad.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Jayne O'Donnell with urbanhealthmedia.org. Thank you.